I think we'll get started. I apologize, we're about 5 minutes later. For those of you who I have not met before, my name's Rob Horn. I'm the Regional Planning Commissioner, and I want to say thank you very much for the time you take on a Saturday and the interest as well. We are doing a webcast today as well, so for those joining us by webcast, welcome and thank you too. Today we're kicking off what's called the Central Transit Corridor Community Building Strategy, and we're going to take you through lots of discussion around that today. We're also going to hear from some members of our community. We're going to give you a little bit of an overview on the region of Waterloo in a global context, and we're going to hear from our Chief Administrative Officer as well. Our consultants' urban strategies are here, and they will be addressing you, and we are going to have reception afterwards so that we can continue the discussion. So I do want to thank you all very much again, and I also want to recognize a couple of councillors, and I hope I've got them all. I'll do the show of hand for people who I missed. Councillors Jane Mitchell and Ross Kelterborn are here as well, and Councillor Glenn Graham. Where is Dan? Thank you. Sorry, I should have kept my focus in that area. So thank you for being here. This initiative is not one of the region of Waterloo alone. The cities of Cambridge, Kitchener, and Waterloo are also very much our partners, and the whole initiative will succeed, as everything else has succeeded in this community, with everyone's participation, be you public sector, private sector, institutional, as a private citizen, as a landowner, as a resident, and all of us as people who enjoy this region. So I will leave it at that for the moment, and at this time I'd like to welcome Mike Murray, who is the Chief Administrative Officer of the Region of Waterloo, for a few comments. Mike?
Well, that's a nice welcome. Thank you. So I just want to echo a couple of things Rob said, and I'll be really quite brief. So first of all, welcome to everybody, and thank you all for taking a couple hours out of your Saturday afternoon to spend it engaged in this really, really important issue. And the planners are organizing this, and I think they've done a pretty good job because they planned it for probably the grayest day of the last week or so. So way to go, planners. It's gonna rain all afternoon, really. So you'll be better off here than out in the rain. But just a couple of comments by way of introduction and welcome. I'm reading a book that's called Start With Why, and it's a reminder to all of us, as we're engaged in activities and community leadership, to really reinforce why are we doing things. So here we are. Talking about rapid transit, talking about the community building aspect of rapid transit, but I think it's always really important just to step back and say, why are we doing this anyway? Why is the region focused on rapid transit? And so there's a couple of reasons, and we've had two objectives for our rapid transit initiative from the very beginning. One is move people, and the other we say shape urban form, shape the form of our community. And why is all of this important? If we look back over the last 50 years or so, and the planners in the room will correct me if I get this wrong, but over the form of growth in this region over the last 50 years or so, population has grown dramatically, something like 500%. But the urban footprint, the land area that we occupy, has grown twice as fast. So if population has grown by like 500%, the urban footprint has grown by 1,000%. So you think about that. We're occupying land at twice the rate of our population growth. So when we look ahead, we're projecting to add another 200,000 people over the next 20 years or so, 25 years. If we keep growing in the same way, we will consume land at twice the rate that our population grows. So it's pretty clearly unsustainable, especially when you think about what some of the next areas for growth and development are. Some really sensitive landscapes to the west and north of the cities of Waterloo and Kitchener. So that's one of the reasons why we're doing this. We're going to add a couple 100,000 people, so where will they live and how will they get around? And that's really why we're focused on rapid transit, is both to help those 200,000 people get around the community, provide more choices to single occupancy car trips, and also to sort of help shape the form of development and encourage growth inward and upward rather than sprawling outward onto pretty sensitive environmental areas. And this activity that we're really starting the process of or continuing the process of now is really focused on that community building part. There's lots of work going on the infrastructure part. It's moving ahead pretty well. But the community building, the shaping urban form, is really critical. And I think it's critical that we engage in that now. I was in Calgary not too long ago. And so how many have been in Calgary recently? Lots. Calgary has a pretty good transit system. They've got a pretty good rapid transit system, good LRT, but their land use planning hasn't matched. And, they are still sprawling to the foothills. So that's going on. And also, if you look at sort of the downtown core, we were in downtown Calgary on a Saturday night, and there were no people around. There was no activity. So, pretty good transit system, but they haven't really capitalized on it to, really create a vibrant, thriving downtown core. And I think that's an opportunity that we have in this community, is to really capitalize on the infrastructure and make sure that the community building and land use planning part all fit together. So this is kind of an integrated approach to building and shaping the community. So those are some of the whys, and I really appreciate everybody taking time to get engaged in that process. And it is a process. This is one more step along the way. The region's been working on land use planning for decades. We've been working on rapid transit for 8 or 9 years. I had more hair when we started this process. But it's a journey. It's a journey, and this is one more step along the way, the process that we're engaged in here. And as Rob said, it's a journey that we all have to work together on. So the region, the area municipalities, the local business community, citizens groups, transit advocates, residents, really, if we're going to be successful at this, we all have to be working on it together. And that's one of the goals of this community building strategy, is to make sure that everybody's voice is heard and that we do this in a collaborative, inclusive way. And this is, today is kind of the start of that and one important step along the road. So I really appreciate people taking the time today, and this, hopefully you'll stay engaged in this process. So thanks again for coming, and we'll hopefully have a productive day. Thanks a lot.
Great. Thank you, Mike. So speaking of change, I'd like to take a few minutes now and talk to you about transformational change. And I'd like to take you on a small journey through our community and talk about what has been, what is, and what can be. More specifically, I want to talk about how we've already transformed. Why do we have to transform? What seems to be the common elements in every community on successful transformation? What have some of the emerging trends been? And what kind of platform do we work from as we move forward? So let's start off with a few examples on how the region has transformed. I have to tell you that there was more information and there were more examples than I could ever dream to have to make the point about past transformation. But I want to start with some numbers. And I think very easily we take numbers and we acknowledge them and we move on. And I think sometimes we need to have a little bit of soak time as to what those numbers mean. So as Mike said, we have grown significantly. So in 1973, I'm not sure how many people were here in 73, but we were 268,000 people as a region. We have grown by 270,000 people since then. So just a little point of reference, the city of Kitchener is roughly, I hope this isn't heresy, about 220,000 people? 230? Thank you. So we've grown by 270,000 people in that period. From 2011 to 2031, we're looking to grow by 190,000 more people. In context of what we've already grown from, it gives you a little bit of a bearing as to how big that quantum is. I came here in 1980, and I can tell you the changes I've seen are startling, but until I put the presentation together, I didn't really have a good grasp on exactly the magnitude. Another statistic that we often take for granted, we're the 10th largest urban population in Canada. So think about the entire country, we're number 10. Within Ontario, we're number 4. And we nudged out the City of London. It's sort of a local competition, local demographic competition. Last go around, but 4th largest in Ontario. And I think it's something that sometimes we simply pass off as good to know rather than it's really, really compelling. So Waterloo Region and Toronto have the top performing economies. Last week we just tabled some more recent building permit statistics. For the year 2011, Canada Mortgage and Housing Corp said this region would decline in housing starts by 11% in 2011. In 2011, we grew by 5%. So there's a swing of 16%. Last year, our industrial, commercial, and institutional construction value was the second highest ever recorded in the region. The global restructuring, as I call it, began in the fall of 2008. We usually have a strong construction year in residential terms if in total we're over 3,000 new housing starts. In 2010, we were 4,300. Last year, we were about 3,300. This year, we're on a really positive track as well. This statistic, I never know what to do with gross domestic product. The number doesn't really mean a whole lot to me. But we increased 5% from 2009 to 2010. And I take you back to 2008, the fall, when we did have the whole global restructuring, the whole subprime mortgage issue, and banks going bankrupt. So a little bit of global context there. Top Ontario investment town, 2009 to 2014. A little context, the early 80s, late 70s, in the city of Cambridge, you could buy a townhouse for $33,000. Should have bought a few. Average house price in Ontario right now is $329,000. Average house price in Cambridge Waterloo right now is $351,000. Roughly tracking, there's been about a 6% appreciation in real estate last year to this year. The workforce, this is really where it gets quite interesting. So 1975 to 2010, so if you can try to take those goalposts and think about them, as I give you a couple examples. Toyota opened in, do people know what year? 1988. Not that long ago. Open text started in, people know? 1991. And I remember back in 1991, and even previous to that, listening to Peter Zosky on CBC talking about, to the three partners, the founding partners of Open Text, saying, so how would you ever digitize the Oxford English Dictionary? That was its beginnings. And in hindsight, it seems like such a very simple prospect. Open Text today is about 4,500 employees worldwide. RIM, let's talk about RIM. Founded in 1984. First product out 1988. The capital infusion before it rolled out was about $30 million. Sales in 2002 were $300 million. Sales in 2011, any guesses? Who has stock? You'll know. $20 billion. $20 billion. Automated Tooling Systems, founded in 1978. ATS has a large presence in Cambridge. A lot of the traffic that you'll find at shift change is ATS in North Cambridge, so don't come down Fountain Street about 3 o'clock. ATS has about 3,000 employees worldwide. And in the next 20 years, as I gave you that number about population growth, we're also looking at about 80,000 jobs created in the next 20 years. Just an aside as well, I think often we make an assumption that growth is a straight line. It certainly does have flow. We're not immune to forces of recession, and certainly there are stop-starts and hot periods and lower periods as well. But still, that kind of growth is expected for our region. Missed one here. I want to talk a little bit about manufacturing. This region has a very strong manufacturing legacy. The manufacturing base has really evolved from one of what I would call basic manufacturing. I could use an industry like Croydon Manufacturing in Cambridge. They used to make lockers and other forms of basic furniture, metal stamping and prep work, pretty basic stuff. That type of manufacturing in large part has left the region. It's gone to places like China, Mexico, and Brazil, which is certainly a powerhouse. Yet, we still maintain a manufacturing workforce of about 21%. And at our apex, manufacturing was about 67,000 jobs. Right now, we estimate or guesstimate it's 55 to 60,000 jobs, but they're of a different kind. And one of the examples given last week again was RIM. I mean, RIM is, there is a manufacturing component to RIM. RIM does have a factory element to it. It's just that we're not so used to thinking of it that way. So manufacturing remains extremely important to this region. Probably a metric that you've heard a lot about. The province in 2006 enacted some new legislation called Places to Grow. And it was the strongest legislation the province has released dealing with land use and development in decades. In the 1970s, the province was big into land use planning. A lot of the decision-making for communities was made out of Toronto. Most of that has been delegated to the region and area municipalities in our case. But in 2006, the McGuinty government released the Provincial Growth Plan. It was started under the previous government, but basically has a number of metrics in it. It compels us to build more densely and to plan for more compact growth. And for us, that was not a really big change. It wasn't a sea change. We had a growth management strategy that was really initiated around 2001, 2002, adopted here. And so if you look at our growth strategy and the provincial growth strategy, they're extremely parallel. But the interesting metric I have here, and you'll see on the slide, by 2015, all communities within the Greater Golden Horseshoe, of which we're a part, must have 45% of new residential development occurring in the built-up area. Last year, 55%. The year before, about 53%. And I think the big message to that is you can plan for it, but you can't compel the construction. So there has to be some convergence of market forces and public policy, and we certainly did see that. So the three top-ranking post-secondary institutions, so U of W, and it's fun as I go through the research to come up with some stats. So U of W started in 1957 with 74 students. It's almost unfathomable when we look at the infrastructure and the attendance and the diversity of programming today. Laurier was established in 1973. It's got obviously a longer history, but in 73 it divested its legal ties with the Lutheran Church, and that was largely because it couldn't receive provincial capital funding. Now, it maintains a really strong relationship with the Lutheran Church, but it had to divest itself and run separately to receive any capital funding. And again, look at Laurier today. Conestoga College, founded as a college, 1967. And again, the new Cambridge campus, we're seeing phase 1 opening now and much more to come. The other key message here is that universities and colleges and post-secondary institutions of all types are not anymore simply centers of learning. They are economic drivers, and I want to get into that a little bit more today. And I think we need to see them in a little different light than we have traditionally. And just to build from the 74 students, we seem to have grown a little bit more. So if you take Conestoga, Laurier, and Waterloo, about 74,000 full-time students, and that's about 80,000 if you roll in the part-time students. This was interesting. 150 plus research institutes. That one surprised me. But I thought the really interesting metric was this one that I'm showing you, triple the national number of patents per million people. So there's a whole lot of innovation happening in this community. Theaters and concert halls, lots of progress in terms of culture, and I will come back to this one a little bit, but these are probably very familiar vignettes to all of you. Center in the Square opened in 1980 at a cost of $11 million. That's a bargain. Pretty good price. Oktoberfest continues to attract somewhere between 500,000 and 1 million visitors. Not all of them are beer drinkers. And they come here because they want to experience a wide variety of other things. The Blues Festival, the Multicultural Festival, we started assembling these, and it's amazing how many festivals and events that we have that draw somewhere around 50 to 100,000. The Busker Festival, another one. We have a lot of events that draw that magnitude, and in isolation they look small, but they continue to grow, and in aggregate they bring a lot of people to this community. So my bottom line is a whole lot of transformation has been happening in our community. It's not always easy to see, but when you cast back, it's very rich, very, very rich. So let me move you forward to why keep transforming. So every day we compete globally. I did a little bit of a cruise with some of my colleagues and some of our partners throughout the community, and I said, who do you compete with? Is it Hamilton? Is it London? Is it Toronto? Is Ottawa still, in there? And who is it? Well, yes, it's some of our neighbors, but it's also Mitaka, Japan, Eindhoven in the Netherlands, Arlington County, which lies right beside Washington, D.C., Ipswich, Massachusetts. I mean, it goes on, and it does happen every day. Lots of American destinations as well. So whether you see it, whether you're part of it, it's occurring. Global borders are disappearing. So everyone remembers NAFTA, free trade. Remember the protracted discussions on shakes and shingles and the lumber industry and impacts in British Columbia. What I find really interesting is that the new phenomenon is really apolitical, and I call it footloose capital. Pretty much all capital is footloose. I went back to almost my economics book, but I went back to just looking up a definition of fixed capitals. So for those who took your micro-macro courses in university, so fixed capital, it really promoted by David Ricardo. It's that portion of the total capital invested in fixed assets such as land, buildings, vehicles, and equipment that stay in the business almost permanently. Almost permanently. So, good example is 20 years ago, a printing industry comes, it sets up its presses, it buys its trucks, it has its employees, it has building, it starts amortizing all of those things, and that's just the way it works. Today, I would say everything, and there are very few exceptions, is movable. A lot of business today is focused on manufacturing. The manufacturing plant and the real estate are assets in and of themselves. You'll look at businesses that enter into long-term leases who, if it's not a good business proposition, will simply leave the space. So we don't have that traditional fixed capital opportunity where you really are able to more anchor a business than we used to. And certainly the other part of footloose capital is people. And increasingly, that is what we're all about. We're all about the best and the brightest minds, and that is what we are capitalizing on in a lot of our community. So I would ask you to keep in mind this concept of footloose capital as we go through here, because it really does underpin so much of why we have to transform. So capital is footloose, transformation is critical to successful competition, and if we're going to compete successfully, we will thrive. Planners are also notorious for coming up with just tons of jargon. We're really good at it. We write lots of books about it. But there is one notion called a complete community. And it's almost a statement of the self-evident, but the corollary is interesting. If you're not a complete community, if you don't have all of the places to work and play and recreate and be and hang out and enjoy, you're not going to be successful. Just going through the literature, To me, a complete community is rich in opportunity, connectivity, and real daily enjoyment. If you think of when you travel to other places, why do you go? Because you want to experience something different, something vibrant. If we go to places like New York and Chicago, for example, why do you go? You know, they have incredible art, they have vibrant streets, they have numerous other opportunities. So you go to experience them. So if you look at successful global transformation, there appear to be three key elements that are repetitive, and I want to quickly take you through each of these. The first one is vision. So what is the community vision? And the vision does have to be focused. There's two elements to that. Normally, when you go through an exercise to say, what is our vision as a community, there's a pretty standard process that goes with that. You've got to be able to engage everyone, give them the basics as I'm sort of giving you today, just some good information about the community. You begin a consultation process with them. You sort through that information to find out what it is that is common to us all. You go out again and say, this is what you told us. You continue to get buy-in. You look for formal endorsement, and then you launch. But it never stops. And I think that's one of the keys, is you've got to always check back in and continue to engage. So that's sort of the process. The other issue is when you vision, it's not an ethereal proposition. You have to have product. When you vision, and when people, and especially in the investment community, comes to this region, they say, what is your vision? I pull this one because it's basically our land use vision and is pertinent to our discussion today. A lot of investors will ask things like, you know, where do you plan to grow? How do you plan to accommodate growth? And because an official plan is a legal document, this has traction. It has standing, and it has legs. So, just an example of one of the products that we have. The second thing that most transformational aspects have is strategy. I just want to give you an example of strategy. So the region has a brownfields remediation program. And I'm going to show you a few examples of how that's been successful. And that has been a partnership in particular with the cities of Kitchener and Cambridge. So for the strategy to actually be activated, you know, we had to have what's called a community improvement plan. So you have to have basically something that ensures that the community is not bonusing or giving advantage to a private company, and you have to have resources to go with that. So Regional Council, for example, provided $2.5 million to help contaminated sites become remediated and redeveloped. You've got to have policies and programs, so there has to be something that you can apply to. In this case, the region and the two cities thus far have come together with programs to do things like development charge grants, grants to help offset environmental study costs, and something called a tax increment grant, which is basically assistance with your actual remediation costs as long as you redevelop, and that money doesn't flow until that redevelopment occurs. And then thirdly, you have to have metrics. So, for example, with the brownfield program, how is the public investment working relative to the type of contaminants removed and the volume, new square footage created, new assessment, new jobs created, new housing units, new business capture, and so on. You have to have meaningful metrics. The third issue is velocity. And this is a really interesting one, and it's one that is often lost. And you've got to be 3 out of 3 to have a successful transformation policy. So what do I mean by that? I'll give you an example. So I love metaphors. You can probably figure that out already. But the region has an affordable housing strategy. In year 2000-2001, we were the lowest or second lowest vacancy rate in Canada, 0.01%. So 1 unit in 100 became available. 3% is usually referred to as a pretty good balance between supply and demand. So we were 0.01%. And we knew not only that we needed to help people who needed a hand up, but it was a really important issue for small business. So small business can have lower wages, and so how do we help our employees? Well, they need to have affordable places to live. So we started off in 2001, 2002, and at 10 kilometers an hour, we had one person come in and say, I'd like to try it. I'd like to do it. And we had a lot of other people standing around and looking to see whether it would work. It did work. It did work in many, many respects. Council started out with $15,000 grants per unit, 20-year agreements, and had some other conditions, but it basically worked. We also had to engage the banks. And that was a little difficult proposition because we had template agreements and banks like to use their own template agreements. So we went through that. And the development industry also said, if we're going to get into affordable housing construction, you've got to be nimble. In other words, you've got to tell us yes or no in a fixed period of time. We'll option a property, we won't be able to buy it, but we need to know if you're good to go, yes or no, does it fit the public interest? So at 100 kilometers an hour, which I would suggest that we have reached, and over the past 10 years, we have helped create almost 2,000 new units of affordable housing, almost $200 million in new construction, and really robust metrics. But what we've also done is, or what we've also seen, is that the vacancy rate has gone up. It's now usually between 2 and 3.2%. And so in doing so, the public interest is really being addressed by open market, save and except for lowest income households, where you need to subsidize the income, and supportive housing. So if somebody needs the basic supports to continue to live in their home, it could be bathing, it could be shopping, it could be basic housekeeping, but it's not overcomable, and it would result in early institutionalization of that person, which wouldn't make sense from a humanitarian or a fiscal perspective. So Regional Council then adjusted the program and said, okay, we're out of the open market, we're now focusing on these areas. So that's really what I mean about velocity. Everyone sort of stands back to look and see if it'll work. Once it does work and things are bankable, away they go. So that third element of velocity is one that's often missed in communities. So a few more examples of transformation. And again, if you can just think of these in the context of footloose capital. The first one is the Accelerator Center, and I will do it in justice, but I'll look to my colleague Tim Jackson in a few minutes to correct me. But basically, the federal, provincial governments, the region of Waterloo with the city of Waterloo, developed what's called the Accelerator Center. It is a place where young businesses and usually young entrepreneurs come with their ideas. Normally they're tech-based ideas. It could be a new app. It could be anything where they need help to get their business going. They can use mentors from the community to help them establish a business plan, to try to seek early capital investment, and to try to grow their ideas. Accelerator Center has been up for about 6 years, up and running. It's in the David Johnson Research and Tech Park, for those people who don't know where it is. The building has already, the incubator has already seen about $72 million in external funding, 600 direct jobs, and when companies reach a certain level of maturity, they move out. So for example, Myovision, a great example of a company that has graduated and moved out, it continues to operate in Kitchener with about 75 employees. Tim, thanks. But 100% of the companies that have graduated from Accelerator Center have stayed in Ontario. 84% have still stayed in this community. Cambridge City Hall. I want to speak a little bit to this as well. I've really focused on private sector examples, but Cambridge City Hall, for those who haven't been, is worth a look. It was built to a LEED Gold standard, and it's a really outstanding example, and LEED Gold is a very hard rating to achieve. And it's a really good example of public investment and sustainability, so I'd encourage you to have a look at it. The Perimeter Institute. We talk about what's under our noses sometimes. I had an opportunity for my first tour not too long ago. It's the #1 research facility for theoretical physics in the world. And it is an amazingly understated place. There are cross appointments of profs who teach there from Princeton, Harvard, Utrecht, many others, MIT. The first Isaac Newton chair was just announced recently, and his name is Xiaogang Wen. And he has been accompanied on his trip from MIT here by an $8 million funding, $4 million of which came from the Perimeter Institute, $4 million from BMO, and it was the largest research grant that BMO has ever given. And Xiao is bringing with him 3 other outstanding world-class physicists, and these are people who can choose where they live in the world and what projects they undertake. And again, right under our nose and absolutely outstanding. The building's amazing. As a planner, don't get me started. So Bauer Kitchen. I put this on not as sort of an infomercial for the Bauer Kitchen, but the fries are really good. It's an example of a really interesting urban space. And we have to support the economy in so many different ways. And a lot of our footloose capital, a lot of the people who can choose to live wherever they live are looking for experiential opportunities on a daily basis. When we talk about things like gyms, patios, running trails, cultural events, bike paths, they're not esoteric. They're economic development tools. It has been proven time and time again in our community. And we do go to some lengths to start canvassing people as well. And while we don't have time today, it's been a really interesting journey for us to talk to people who have ideas and have interest in the community and have great potential to grow, to say what keeps you here and what brought you here. So it's retention it's attraction and retention. Advanced manufacturing, I did touch on this before, but simply to say that manufacturing and the tech industry are not two solitudes. There's certainly a whole lot of overlap there. And I use the example of ATS as well, and I happened to be on 401 on Thursday night, and there were 2 ATS trucks just on their way to Pearson. So the response from the manufacturing industry has been to find precision value-based commodities, and certainly many of them are doing that. So we do continue to transform. We have a whole lot going for us, but there are a whole lot of things that we need to pay attention to as well. If I can just sort of give you a point of reference, the Regional Waterloo Airport is at the top of your screen there, and this is the north end of Cambridge. The area in black is about 300 hectares of new industrial land that we need to bring on. And part of the reason we need to bring that on is that we have a shortage of large industrial lots, things larger than about 8 hectares in size. We need these for a number of reasons. The green industries who create large infrastructure need large lots. Many businesses are consolidating. Maple Leaf is a great example. Maple Leaf is in the process of consolidating from all over the country to create one of the most high-tech campuses that exist, and there are a number of other industries throughout the world who are looking to do that. We need to make sure that we're as well positioned as possible to compete for that type of business, so we are working very hard to establish those east side lands with the City of Cambridge. Speak just very briefly, this is the Tannery building. People are probably aware of it, roughly Victorian Victorian Charles. Google, Mike, we had some allusion to that. RIM, Accelerator Center are in there. This is an example of a development where this tax increment grant, this assistance with contaminated sites remediation, was undertaken. The region and the City of Kitchener provided about $1 million towards the remediation of that property. There are a ton of examples that I can give you on sort of the new urban living, and I think this is a niche that is really, really emerging on a daily basis. You probably all can think of a number of great examples. My experience in small town Ontario in the last 20 years has been that cores are usually for lower income people or seniors, and a lot of areas just don't have that urban living experience, and we're certainly seeing that velocity. So if you go back to my motorcycle slide, you can decide what speed we're at, but we're certainly not at 10 kilometers an hour. I also wanted to speak a little bit to the subdivisions, the greenfields. We have about 28,000 units of supply still in greenfield development. And the greenfield developers have done an amazing job if you look at densities of development from 15, 20 years ago, I can give you lots of examples where the densities have doubled. And I would argue that the communities are better. They have a better range and mix of housing types, and they're the types of communities where you can find different housing forms and live there all your life if you choose. Just great, great, great examples. City Centre, the center block in the city of Kitchener is another great example. It's been in play for probably 10 years now, and that's just off the top of my head. You see the sales center there now, but you also see an enormous amount of transformation that is just beginning in downtown Kitchener, and the potential is enormous. There are about 15,000 people who work in downtown Kitchener, and Mayor Zare was at a home builders event last Thursday night. He's just identifying the former works yards that will be transformed, and they have a potential to, on their own, double the employment capacity of downtown Kitchener alone. Waterscape, if you look in the distance at the building, that building is beside the Grand River. It's on Highway 24 in the Galt City Centre. That was one of the most contaminated and the most difficult to remediate sites in this entire region. Coal tar right beside the Grand River. The City of Cambridge and the region came together, and depending on the form of development that occurs, there could be a combined $7 million commitment to that site. So you see the first tower go up. There's a number of other opportunities for additional development, but the grants are structured in that unless development occurs and reassessment occurs, the grants don't flow. So you have to perform to actually receive those grants. The barrel yards on Herb Street, you see the hotel going up. If you haven't been by, office, retail, residential, a very, very large development. Waterloo Region Museum, have people been in? Can I get a show of hands? Who's been in? Oh, good. Okay. We'll get the rest of you in. So just opened late last year. The museum's built at the Homer Watson property owned by the region. It's about 44,000 square feet. The region has held about 45,000 artifacts that few people have seen for decades, and the museum provides that platform. Built by the region of Waterloo, it's much more than a museum. In the past, this site, so the Dune Heritage site, attracted about 40,000 people a year. The museum opened last year. I think we opened in November, the exhibits. Over the course of the year, we had 56,000 people, and the site was largely shut down because we had construction going on. So it is becoming a real major destination. We also have a room dedicated for art exhibits. We're now able to accommodate world-class exhibits where we haven't had before. It's been a real education. There are two aspects to being able to host a major development, and it could be a private collection of Renoirs. It could be anything, but you have to have two things. You have to have the physical, so you have to have climate control and layout, access and egress, and you have to have a clean record of no break and enters for 2 years. Then you will be considered for insurance. So the specs, and I'm not doing the specs justice, but they are very, very detailed, and there are very few places in this region and around this region who could actually host the exhibit. So another reason we're really, really excited. And the potential in this community is enormous if you look at all the other museums and cultural centers. So a little taste for those who haven't been in of actually what we have to offer. And Uptown Waterloo, I can't think of any better example of a transformed core. When I came here in 1980, I think the focal point was Pier 1. Got a few nods on that one. So intercity transit, GO and VIA. The corner of King and Victoria Street is roughly where our current train station is. GO service started in December of last year. I'm hoping and encouraging you all to take GO service. You can actually use GRT to get there as well. There's my unabashed plug. And the corner of King and Victoria Street has largely been purchased by the region of Waterloo, and we're just about to initiate a very large transformation of that site to bring together GO, VIA, Grand River Transit, private parking, and on top of all that, we believe that there is significant development opportunity. So a really exciting proposition. I just want to speak for a quick minute on Grand River Transit. In 1999, the region took over transit. There were about 9 million rides. Last year, we topped out at about 19.5 million rides. So we've gone from 9 million to 19.5 million. Our goal is to get you from your door of your home, bypassing your car, to a stop, and ultimately, of course, connections from this into rapid transit. Just to give you an example of growth as well, the iExpress service, so limited stops from Cambridge to Kitchener to Waterloo. When we started in 2005, we had about 2,300 rides per weekday, 2,300. Just checked with my colleagues, we're now 13,000 rides a day. So incredible growth. That said, we also know that we need to do lots of work to improve the service and to induce people in particular who have choice. I can get in my car or I can get on transit. So, rapid transit, as Mike said, really the focus of this initiative is the shaping the community part. I know you've heard lots about the where will it go and where will the stations be and what will the technology be. The other way to look at this, I think, is that with 19.5 million rides and buses with increasingly shortened headways, we are coming to a point where we are going to be reaching our capacity with conventional, and hence this is the next step. I was in Durham region yesterday as well, and just listening to almost an echo. They're about 2 years behind us. They've got LRT planned as well, and sort of the suite of it and the experiences are very, very similar. And I am going to leave this to our consultants to talk about, but just to give you a flavor for the number of stops, and I'm sorry you probably can't read that terribly well, and the number of opportunities we have on shaping the community. So today the bottom line is that transformation has to continue, and I want to just talk to you a little bit about a couple of lessons learned. So as we've gone through this process, and I would say in particular from 2002, and I think Mike alluded to the fact that we really started the detailed planning on rapid transit and the discussion in 2002, we've been a collaborative community. We work hard to find the middle ground. When transformational opportunities or considerations arise, it's often new skin when it's a positional situation. That there is not a middle ground. There is a choice to be made. So I think we've learned that there's not always a middle ground. In terms of revisiting the vision, I talked a little bit about strategic planning, and I think in hindsight, perhaps it's more remind people of the vision that we stay focused. It's very easy to get off of the vision. Nimbleness. As business decisions happen with increasing velocity, I think public institutions and other institutions struggle to keep up. We're certainly charged with making sure that public investment is done wisely, and that often takes a little bit of time. The question is, how much is enough in terms of making that decision, and how quickly can you get back to business? And finally, I think this region is a really great example that the public sector will intervene when the market's not responding or when the market needs some stimulus to get itself re-involved. And I spoke a little bit about that as well. So the transformation imperative, I did a very quick cruise, and I'm just going to end on these, and I'll let you read these, of some of the transformational leaders globally and what they had to say. And I thought Bill Gates' view about a worldview very compelling. I'll go through these quickly. Mike Lazaridis talking about the aspect of building something unique and building something value-based and something impactful. Jerry Reimers, Christie Digital, a little bit more specific, talking about the magnitude of investment. And certainly Christie, I think we don't always recognize that Christie's right in front of our noses. I think Nagano was a great example of their equipment being in front of us at the Olympics. Angela Merkel, Chancellor of Germany, she's the de facto leader of the European Union. So the German economic powerhouse, certainly a recognition on her part that they have to be part of the global community. As strong as they are, they've got to be part of that community. And finally, I'd be remiss if I didn't include David Johnson and that whole issue that I was talking about with academic institutions as no longer being simply places of learning, they're economic drivers. I leave you with this slide just for your frame of reference. I'd suggest to you that this is not for altruistic or philanthropic reasons that we think about this way. I think the transformation globally is a simple imperative. Our prosperity depends on it. That said, and I hope I've proven my point, we've gone through an incredible transformation, and we continue to embrace transformation and find our way through it. I think we're incredibly well positioned as we proceed, and I think as we get a little more specific into the flavor of this initiative, we will continue to transform. So I thank you all very much. So it is now my pleasure to introduce one member of our community to speak. We have a number of community members who will speak, but I'll ask Tim Jackson to come forward if I could. And Tim is the Chief Executive Officer of the Accelerator Center, and I know he's got a tight schedule. So Tim, all yours.
Thank you. It was interesting when Mike started. He talked about the two aspects to the rapid transit plan. One being moving people, and the second is what happens on the line. And I think, Mike, you referred to it as shaping urban form. And I think that's exactly right. And I think the two are linked. And I want to talk a little bit about both, but you can't talk about one without talking about the other. Mike also referenced that this is a journey. And what I think is so inspiring about this journey is we don't know where it's going to end. And that's what I want to talk a little bit about today, is that I hope we don't get into a prescriptive formula, because I think this community has so many times in the past responded to a situation where it's been given creative opportunity and been given a set of principles or guidelines, and then has let things happen. And I'll talk about some specific examples as to why I think that's relevant, and try to take what maybe a bit of a theoretical concept and use it, one particular example at the end, to talk about how it has transformed some aspects of this community, and why I think this project should take a similar approach. For the last 10 months, I've been seconded to the University of Waterloo as the Vice President External Relations, and I want to talk a little bit about the impact this whole project will have on the university. I, in one of my volunteer capacities, chair the board of Centre in the Square, which was one of the examples Rob gave. One thing we know at the Centre in the Square is that a very, very, very small number of students at our post-secondary institutions have ever been inside the Centre in the Square. Now, the I-Express has made a huge difference, but it wasn't that long ago that the Centre in the Square, we used to talk about that a student could leave the University of Waterloo campus on a Friday afternoon and get to Massey Hall in Toronto faster than they could get to Centre in the Square using public transit. And there were some reasons. There's buses right on the campus of the university to get you downtown Toronto. But the key message, I think, is that students, the easier we can make it for students to move around this community, the more they will see of this community. And why does that matter? Well, 74,000 students in the community. As we've started to add things like a medical school, and as we have a shortage of doctors, the more of those medical school students that we can keep in this community will respond to our needs. The more of the engineers that we're graduating that we can keep in the community will help the tech companies who are looking for engineers, which allows them to stay in this community and build a local economy. And what's important as both from a university standpoint, when we talk to students about why do they leave on weekends, and I'd be lying if I didn't say that was an issue at the University of Waterloo in particular. A great number of our students get on a bus or carpool and go to Toronto on the weekend. We have to get them around the region and get them to understand this is a place that they want to live and they want to stay. Because it's much easier, I think, to keep someone here who's already here than try to recruit someone here. And that will have a huge impact, I think, on our growth. We're going to grow from a population standpoint, as I understand it, whether we like it or not. So let's have some input into the types of people that we can keep here. And I don't mean that in a pejorative sense. I simply mean that if we're educating folks like engineers and doctors, let's keep them in the community, because that then leads to the economic benefit to the community. I think there's also some spin-offs for some of the issues that the cities are dealing with. When I look at Northdale, for example, that the City of Waterloo is dealing with, I think what's going on with rapid transit can have an impact on that. Make it easier for students to move throughout the region means they don't all have to live as close to the institution as they do now. And so I think the City of Waterloo, for example, could embrace the rapid transit project as a way to help deal with the situations that are happening in Northdale. But let's talk about the urbanization around the stations, because I think this is the real opportunity. And I think it's an opportunity to say we need to create an empowering environment, and the cities need to take control and say we need to do things around heightened density requirements and heightened density restrictions, but we cannot be prescriptive about what the outcome is. We have to let the community and the developers and the creative types figure out what will happen. I'm convinced that if we give people a bit of what's the word I'm looking for? A bit of a canvas, and we give them the tools, we will end up with some incredible stuff around our stations, and we will end up with some incredible development around our stations. And I'm convinced we will end up with cafes, and we will end up with music on the street, and we will end up with buildings that are a blend of commercial and retail, industrial perhaps, and residential. But I think we should let the community figure that out. But to do it, we're going to have to be, and the cities are going to have to take a leap of faith around planning. And the cities are going to have to take a bit of a leap of faith around things like heightened density and letting developers be creative. Because this community has responded in the past when we've done that. So rather than saying this is exactly what we think needs to go at this station, or this is exactly what needs to go at that station, I think we let it happen, but we let it happen recognizing it will be different than what it is today. Because we will absolutely have to embrace the fact there will be concentrated development around the stations. And then that will then lead to, as students and others are moving throughout the region to places, they will see what's going on around the stations, much like some of the things that you see in Europe. And it's not a perfect example, but you think of some of the train stations in Europe and all the activity that happens there, where you have commercial activity, you have cafes, and train stations in some of the old European cities have become the focal point of the creative and the artistic community. We could do exactly the same. This notion of having places where people congregate, but letting them figure out what those places will look like. I was at a session yesterday, and we were talking about social media. And someone pointed out that when we talk about social networking, and when we talk about social networking today, we think about Twitter and Facebook and the like. But they said, don't forget that that same thing is happening face-to-face. And the same people that are using social media to socially network also want to network face-to-face. But they want to do it in cafes and where there's live music and neat places. And so I think we have to generate that. And so I realize I'm being a little bit non-specific. But let me give you the example that I think sort of pulls it together, at least for me. Rob talked about the University of Waterloo. The University of Waterloo was formed in 1957 with what was no more than a few dozen students. But the trustees that sat around and created the University of Waterloo, and I obviously wasn't there, so I don't know exactly how the discussion went, but they made a decision to take an intellectual property policy approach that has not been taken anywhere else. The intellectual property policy at the University of Waterloo is very, very simple. If you invent it, you own it. Doesn't matter whether you're a student, a staff member, a faculty member. If you invent it, you own it. That's unlike anywhere else in the world. If you go to the University of Toronto and you're a researcher or you're a grad student and you develop something, the University of Toronto owns a piece of that. And that's the way every university does it. But someone at the University of Waterloo said, let's try this, because if we do this, it will have significant benefits. And I wasn't there, but I've got to imagine the discussion that went on, and people said, that's crazy. As a university, we're providing the lab space, we're providing all the infrastructure, we're providing the overhead. We have to get something in return. But someone said, no, let's just let the inventor own and see what happens. Well, what has that led to? In a very short period of time, in just over 50 years, the University of Waterloo consistently ranks #1 in terms of the leaders of tomorrow that it generates, consistently ranks #1 in terms of being the most innovative university in the country, consistently generates more economic activity through spin-off companies and commercial activity than any other university in the country, because commercially oriented researchers are attracted to the University of Waterloo. And that is why you have companies like Research in Motion here. It's why you have companies like Christie Digital here. But it was that notion of what seemed like a very small thing, which was a leap of faith, to say, we don't know what's going to happen, but let's try something different. And let's just have an intellectual property policy that's very open. We don't know what that's going to lead to. And to me, this is exactly the same thing, that we need to be very open, but we need to be somewhat non-prescriptive, but we need to be very liberal about the type of things that we want to see around our rapid transit stations, because I think it could have exactly the same transformational impact that the intellectual property policy has had at the University of Waterloo. So thanks, Rob, for giving me a few minutes. And I apologize to the others. I am running. It's hockey finals day in Waterloo, so I'm off coaching my son's hockey team, so I apologize. I'm not being rude by taking, well, I am being rude, but that's the reason I'm being rude, taking off. Thanks.
Thank you, Tim. I hope you win. It's now my pleasure to call on Melanie Hare and George Dark, the Principals of Urban Strategies, to introduce you to the project specifically. Welcome.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you for your time this afternoon, an opportunity to introduce and launch the community building strategy with you. We are very excited to be here. Our team, many of us have lived and have worked in the communities of the region of Waterloo and can attest to the culture of rich, dynamic, and transformational attributes. And so we, having done a similar process in a number of communities, really look forward to working with you on this. We are here to help the region, the cities, and the many communities along the Central Transit Corridor to create a community building strategy. And in parallel with the engineering design of the actual line and the transit line, we look to work to paint that canvas, as Tim said, to unlock the full potential that this legacy investment in transit offers you. And so what I'd like to do today is I'm going to go through this quite quickly. We'll be around after the presentation and for the reception, but I recognize we've been sitting and listening for a long time, so I'm going to go through quite quickly and do a couple of things. I'd like to introduce our team. I'd like to tell us a little bit about the process, and I'd like to tell you about opportunities we hope you take us up on to get involved and participate with us through this process. So let me introduce our team. We've brought together 3 firms. Urban Strategies is leading the process, but the 3 of us together, Urban Strategies, Nelson Nygaard, and Colliers, bring the requisite community building expertise from a perspective from Urban Strategies on transit-oriented planning, urban design, and community engagement. Nelson Nygaard on their expertise around active transportation and full range of mobility. And Colliers International with both an local market knowledge really grounded in this community, so understanding that potential. We have a number of my team with me today, and I'd like to introduce them to you, please, if you don't mind, everyone. The co-lead in the project is my partner, George Dark. Beside him, Daniel Comerford, Craig Lametti, Matt Armstrong, and Peter Marquin. And from Colliers today, we have Carl Innanen. And this team, amongst a few others, have been started working about a month ago with our client team, which includes several key members from the regional staff, the Rapid Transit Project, but importantly to us also planners from each of the each of the cities. And so collectively, we are working together to guide this project. We bring to you experience of doing similar projects. Again, our expertise and what we're bringing to you is not designing the line, the stations, or the alignment, but actually the city, how the city and the communities touch and reach and connect with that line, the opportunities for transformation that comes from that. So having worked locally on this, having worked across the province, throughout North America, we hope to be able to leverage that experience and apply it in a very Waterloo-specific way. Mike started us off with a quote from the book and the big question, why? Why are we doing this? This is not a traditional land use plan. This is probably, to capture some of Tim's ideas, a very liberal interpretation of a planning exercise to make sure we explore and capture community building opportunities offered by a significant investment in transit, to align that with the growth strategies that you've been working on as a community for many years, to see the strengthening of existing communities, businesses, institutions, and experience throughout Waterloo. What does that mean? How does that look? That may mean a full range of things from enhancements and improvements in new public spaces and transformation of streets, encouraging positive new forms of building, and you saw some of that already from Rob's presentation around the types of urban living options that have been emerging in the last decade in particular in the region. Enhanced mobility, looking at ways where a line which now will connect Galt to Conestoga Mall, that the region can really be strengthened on a number of ways. Making great places is all part of what we'll be looking for. The outcome of this needs to really be an expression of how we can enhance the experience in the region, how we can experience it as students, experiencing not only their campus or their educational facility, but as an entire place and offers opportunities in the region, how you live here, how you can work here, how you can bring visitors here, and the kind of experience. The outcome needs to include a very robust community dialogue. We need your help to help us define and prioritize some of the community building opportunities here. There needs to be, those will transform into strategies. We need to integrate that along with the evolving detailed design of the actual engineering of the transit line, and ultimately become a framework to help the region, cities, and communities leverage this investment. We talked about a journey a little while ago this afternoon, and this is clearly one stop along a journey, which started probably 40 years ago when rapid transit was identified. And we think it's a really critical foundation at this point in the process and along this journey to set a foundation for community building as an aspiration, how you're shaping and forming your community and being able to articulate that well beyond the traditional means through zoning and land use and densities. The process is approximately 12 months long for creating the community building strategy, a very ambitious timeline, but you're a very ambitious project in rapid transit. And it's important to kind of get in and have these conversations at this moment of the process. And engaging the community is key. So the blue ovals you see along this trajectory of 12 months indicate key moments for community engagement. So one of the primary drivers of this is to have that community engagement opportunities throughout each stage of the project. And as Tim mentioned, perhaps the analogy is to help us paint that canvas. Go. There are 4 phases to our project. The first one we've called understanding. That's really establishing an understanding of what's the baseline or what's out there today at a regional level, but also at the very community level, and to ask the question, what do we want the Central Transit Corridor to be? We've started to do some work with the help of our municipal colleagues to start to paint that picture. There's been an awful lot of work done along the rapid transit line, understanding what that looks like. But really what we need to more fully elaborate is that there are a whole lot of experiences, places, and opportunities along this line, everywhere from downtowns to places of employment to my house, universities, technology parks, evolving downtowns and neighborhoods. And it's very important for us to define how the city should respond to the rapid transit line. And that's really what the strategy is about. We need to start at a regional scale, recognizing there are 3 cities and 4 townships, but also understanding how people are really moving through and to the region, from key destinations such as Stratford to Paris, over to Guelph. We talked about people getting on the GO train and getting into Toronto. So really understanding where people are going, from within the larger region, the actual region, and within the communities. And then along the Central Transit Corridor itself. So this map is quite a wonderful mosaic at the scale. I'm not sure how much else you can actually read from this, but you'll see a very large version of this downstairs. And this is our attempt to start to understand the kind of places, the kind of uses, the key destinations along the corridor today, and how those relate to the introduction of a higher order transit line, which will take us from Ainsley Terminal up to Conestoga Mall. The second phase is, we call it exploring, which really looks at the potential, establishing the opportunities of the unique issues and places that are particular across the line to any particular station or even at a sub-corridor level. Describing what it means is our third phase, so articulating what the community building opportunities are for each of the three cities at that scale. What does it really look like so people can help to envision and understand and help us transform that or shape that. And then finalizing, creating a set of corridor strategies. So that's actually creating the document which will come out of all of your help in creating those strategies. Throughout this process, we can't do this. The city and regional staff can't do this. We really need the community partners to be the key voice in this. And so as part of our work plan, we've identified a number of key ways to get your input. In person, today is the start of an in-person dialogue. You'll see some panels downstairs where we're encouraging you to pick up those markers and make those messy and have your voice and say. But we're launching the project, and we welcome you here today and invite you to continue the conversation. There are also a number of, probably a total of a dozen major events throughout the process. We started in the last 2 weeks meeting with 40 or 50 key stakeholders from a variety of interests and perspectives, hospitals, universities, people running your cultural centers, your rec facilities, the developers, and the members of the broader community. We will be doing establishing a project storefront, and on Tuesday we invite you to come out for the first open house and community workshop, which is about visiting the Central Corridor. There are 3 forums. We're calling them Exploring the Opportunity Forums, and then when we get to drafting the process strategies, we're going to be out in the community in each of the 3 cities, sharing those with you, looking for your input and so forth. So just to speak a little bit further on the project storefront is really going to become the home of the project. We hope to be able to share exactly where that will be with you in the next week. But this is a place where many, and if not all of the meetings will be taking place, the working sessions. All of the work that is produced will be available and accessible for you to come. There will be people at the storefront on a weekly basis. I think Danielle will be spending some of her working days there. And we'll be working there as a project team. So we welcome you to join us at our storefront and hope it becomes a valuable place for you to know where to come to get information on the project. On Tuesday, we have the visioning workshop. It's from 3 to 5:30 will be an open house. We will be giving a presentation in more detail around the material, our understanding to date, and some of the opportunities to share, express, and expand the community building potential. And then we want to hear from you through a workshop. So that's at Knox Presbyterian Church on Tuesday. If you can join us, or please invite anyone that you think might be interested. There are, in April, May, and June, in each month, a series of days where we will be holding a range of workshops, open houses, and keynote speakers, talking about some of the key topics we think are valid and important to tease out, express, and explore, enhancing mobility, creating great places, and strengthening the region. Those forums will be started kicked off with speakers. Some folks were bringing from away in order to share their experiences in the range of opportunities that they've had in their communities throughout North America, and so you can get a taste of what's happening elsewhere. There will be open house forums, and when the doors will be open for people to come in and share and talk about and comment on the work done. And so those forums, we look forward to working with you. Social media, social networking, E-strategies are all a key part of the dynamic, and there are a number of ways the project is set up to accommodate that kind of dialogue. Today, the project website has gone live, http centralcorridortransit.ca, so please have a look and tell us what you think about the website. Yes, thank you, Becky. Yes. Thank you, Becky. We also will be loading the panels that are downstairs up on that website for you to access. Obviously, the more traditional means of mailing or calling, in particular Becky. And we wanted just to leave this with you, which is some of the comments and thoughts we have heard so far from the stakeholders we've met with. And these are all over the board, which is important, and we appreciate that. And it's part of that, painting that canvas in a very liberal way, to use Tim's language. Around each station, there should be neighborhoods serving as living, working, and shopping needs. I would like to use LRT to get from art galleries to cultural venues. We need to engage youth. Businesses would like to be able to attract staff by having the enhanced transit service. There are some concerns as well that are expressed. How will the line divide public spaces? What will things look like around it? And how will that transformation be? What will it look like? So there's a whole range of comments here, and we try to understand these, distill these, and bring them forward, but we really encourage you to help us in a blank board downstairs to start to augment that conversation, and we'll do more so of that on Tuesday. So thank you for your time. That's a very brief overview. We look forward to working with you, and we'll look forward to talking to you afterwards.
Thank you very much, Melanie. I appreciate that. And I was asked to remind people, Knox Church, 3 o'clock. 3 o'clock, 5:30 is an open house. And 5:30 is the presentation. Great, thank you. We also have 3 members of the community who we would also like to invite, and I would like to start with Mike Bowes just to speak a little bit to the initiative. And Mike, thank you. Welcome.
Is this microphone high enough? Greetings and thank you for having me here. It's a real pleasure for me to speak to you today. I've had an interest in urban affairs ever since playing SimCity on our family's very first 486 computer almost 20 years ago. One of my favorite challenges back then was to try and grow a city while adding as few roads as possible. And I guess not a whole lot has changed in that time. I love riding my bike in Waterloo region, and I actually blog regularly about it, about local issues that affect cyclists. And I've been riding my bike all throughout the last 6 winters that I've been here, and also that brief transition between fall and spring that we had in this last year. I love sharing my passion for cycling with others. But I know that many in this region don't share my tolerance for cold or wet weather and long distances, which is why I'm excited about rapid transit in Waterloo. Rapid transit will fuel intensification along the Central Transit Corridor. We've seen some examples of that today, and if you bike down it with me today, you'll see it's already started in anticipation of light rail, with infill and brownfield developments, which will soon become new homes, jobs, grocery stores, shops, restaurants, and more. This is great news for cyclists. The closer your destinations are to each other, the easier it is to travel between them by bike. With LRT and BRT, if you need to go further than your legs and pedals can carry you. Of course, this can also apply if you prefer to walk. Either way, rapid transit makes healthier living here more attractive. The majority of cycling traffic already takes place close to the Central Transit Corridor. I believe the region did a study on that in the last year. These 2 transportation modes are going to complement each other very nicely. As we grow, our streets will also become more lively places to visit and enjoy, I hope with great public art and public meetings places. I envision that many more pedestrians and cyclists are going to be in downtown, uptown, and all around town. And as both the Maxim and statistics tell us, there's safety in numbers. Our region's rapid transit transformation will not only make us healthier and happier, but make our streets and neighborhoods safer places to be as well. I'm also excited about this process that's being launched today that will give us all an opportunity to contribute to the region's overall vision for changing the shape of our community. I'm looking forward to hearing the ideas that come out from planners and especially from the public. I have a few ideas of my own, like how rapid transit could be complemented with an improved walking and cycling network, and possibly even bike sharing that could extend your range to and from stations. This is our opportunity to work with the region and with the cities to help make our streets more vibrant places to visit and enjoy. My wife and I recently moved to downtown Kitchener. We wanted to be closer to the Iron Horse Trail for me and good transit for her, but we're mostly excited to witness and participate in the coming changes to our region. I hope that when I graduate from university for the third and hopefully final time, we'll be able to keep within this region the professional skills that have grown and developed here and be part of our city's ongoing transformation. Finally, I want to look at the coming changes to our region through the perspective of my faith, a faith shared with many of the early settlers and barn raisers in this region. In this faith we pray, "Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven." These are words of hope and anticipation that a better world is coming. In a better world, the poor and infirm get treated justly and can get to their jobs and destinations just as easily as anyone else. In a better world, our lifestyle choices, like where we live, how we get around, where we buy things from, will make us better stewards of our world. In a better world, we can come together in beautiful public spaces as a community and brush shoulders with people from every walk of life. I believe that public transit and the shape that will give to Waterloo region have the potential to point to and affirm a common hope and anticipation for a better world in this place. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike. It's now my pleasure to call on Daisy Arsenault to join us. Daisy, thank you. Welcome.
Thanks. It's actually, most everything has been said that I would want to be said or I would like to say. Hearing about how much the region has changed has certainly been my personal experience that I've witnessed firsthand. I'll never forget the first time I came to Waterloo and to audition. I went to Wilfrid Laurier University and studied music therapy. So I came to audition and my dad drove me to my audition. Chair Ken Sealing, if he was here, he'd be happy to know that I'm also a pipe organist. And my dad drove me and we saw University Avenue. We got so excited and we turned off the first exit and we hit a dead end at Bridge Street. Well, now you can almost like go to Lake Huron from University Avenue, it feels like. But you know, the region has changed significantly since I've been a student and have graduated since. My husband has graduated recently from the University of Waterloo and from the School of Architecture. We were here when the School of Architecture, we live in Uptown Waterloo. We started when the School of Architecture was at the main campus and is now in Cambridge, and he would commute all the way to Cambridge. Anyways, we see significant changes. But I actually grew up in London, Ontario. And I was born in New Zealand, but I've had several family trips back to visit with family in New Zealand, where we would stay for a couple months at a time, living with family that live in New Zealand's capital, Wellington, as well as one of the biggest cities in New Zealand, Auckland. I've served a mission for my church, which took me to living in Vancouver, British Columbia, as well as Kelowna, Kamloops, and Prince George. My husband grew up in Montreal, Quebec, and completed his missionary service in and around Bordeaux, France. as a younger couple, because we're still young, right? As a younger couple with 2 small children, we lived for a brief time in Rome, Italy, as well as Mississauga, Ontario. My husband and I's metropolitan repertoire are consistent with the experiences of our peers that are of our age generation, as well as younger than us. Many of us are very well traveled and love the buzz and the brilliance of a culturally diverse city. Coming to Waterloo, Ontario, as I explained, for the purpose of schooling has been an interesting experience just the same. Right before my eyes, I've watched this area grow from charming, isolated small towns to a trending united metropolis. Living in the core was a natural fit to us in choosing to purchase a home, so we live in Uptown. And our priorities were threefold. Number 1, a safe, caring community. 2, being able to walk to the library, grocery store, restaurants, and school. Our kids attend Elizabeth Ziegler Public School. And 3, being close to the main transit line was a big priority for us. When the region confirmed the light rail transit plan, it confirmed to us as residents that this region had matching priorities and therefore became even more appealing to us. As a parent of 3 growing children, they are 10, 9, and 7, these priorities are increasingly significant. Like every parent, we desire to nurture their mental, physical, and spiritual health. We appreciate how the light rail transit will be an attractive and sustainable option for our children to practice their independence when they're teenagers, the time when the light rail transit is proposed to be completed. They really look forward to riding that train. And I look forward as a mom to not being the taxi mom and letting them, go to where they need to go. So that was a big factoring decision as to where we would live. We appreciate how the LRT is attracting positive investment into our neighborhood and is further upgrading it culturally, visually, and with like-minded individuals. We live just a few doors down from the condominium, the 42, which was perfectly displayed for us earlier. Ever since our new neighbors have moved in, we've noticed an increase in caring people walking our neighborhood and contributing to its safety and quality of life. Our children have even more neighbors to pelt their endless questions to. With the LRT attracting investment into its cores, we appreciate how the beautiful surrounding land is protected for both farming as well as a naturalistic retreat where we hike as a family, explore, and rejuvenate within the beautiful nature that surrounds us. I stand here today as one of many families who choose to live in the core or are choosing right now to move to the core or move back to the core. I know many people within each example. And because of the many benefit it offers our high quality of life, I would have to say. These families are our neighbors, our friends, our children's friends, and co-workers. We're already seeing the benefits of the LRT and look forward to what the future has to offer as a result of it being built. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Daisy. And now my pleasure to call on Kathy Brothers. Kathy, welcome.
Good afternoon, folks, and I'm really pleased to be a part of this launch of the community building strategy because as I've been listening this afternoon, I'm really thinking of how consistent this is with the approach that our region has taken from the outset in encouraging as much dialogue and input as possible from all parts of the community in creating a transit system, and in particular the light rail transit part of that public transportation system that meets as many needs in the community as possible. So congratulations to the organizers of today. I think you're really on the right track in allowing lots of room for community input. My background is as a social worker, that I've spent my career in health and social services. And for the past 2 years, I've been the executive director of an organization called Capacity, Waterloo Region. And I'm here today really to just bring some comments from Capacity, Waterloo Region, because we've been very, very positive and supportive and excited about how the light rail transit is going to really, in many ways, transform our community and address some pretty important social, environmental, health, economic kinds of issues for the people that live in the community. That, just to put in context, Capacity Waterloo Region is one of those kind of backbone organizations where our role is to encourage nonprofit organizations to find new solutions to complex social problems, to be bolder, to take more risks, to be more courageous. And it's all about bringing together the people and the ideas that can create bold social change. So we have a fair bit of insight into the kind of barriers that people in the community, particularly people served through our health and community services, which at some point in our life, as all of us, face in really having their needs met in the community. I think that there is something just so positive, as I said at the outset, about being part of a region where planning isn't just at one level. We're not just looking at where the route should go, but also all the ways that route and that the whole system impacts our quality of life. I think that, the leadership in our region and our wanting to always work towards collaborative solutions, although I really liked one of the earlier slides that was shown in terms of the importance of also being nimble and not processing things forever. Eventually we have to make decisions, but hopefully those decisions are based on lots and lots of community input. I think that, I think for those of us, and I suspect it's all the people here, in the national news in recent weeks there has been so much publicity about our neighbors down the road in Toronto with, their decision-making around public transportation. And the whole approach there seems to be so much, like the word in my social work language we use all the time is dysfunctional. But I was grown and grew up in Toronto, or born and grew up in Toronto, so I better not label the whole city dysfunctional because my mom still lives there. But but there is a divide and conquer mentality that we have seen, throughout, recent weeks in the media that I just don't think is the character of Waterloo Region. That today's event reminds me of another forum that I attended in this very council chamber earlier this week. And it was the Immigration Partnership Council that the region of Waterloo is actually hosting. And the purpose of the event earlier this week was to, the council was looking for affirmation from the community, and particularly the immigrants in the community, that they're on the right track with the priorities they have chosen. And the 3 priority areas for the Immigration Partnership Council are settling, belonging, and work. And we had tremendous affirmation from the immigrants that were present at this forum in terms of the importance of all those issues. I mean, it's not exactly rocket science, but, basic to everybody's mental health and sort of adjustment to their new home was these themes of settling, belonging, and work. Well, then when I thought about today, I thought, belonging and work are absolutely at the basis of the well-being for all of us in the community. For some people, they have many assets. They have a wide variety of friends, family, faith. They're good educations, well-resourced, and belonging and work are not a huge challenge. Although for many people in our community, that sense of belonging and the ability to find and keep meaningful work is a real challenge. And I think that without without exaggerating, this light rail transit and the way it's going to enhance our whole public transportation system in Waterloo region is going to go a really long way to helping people feel as if they belong in our community, that there's an equity and inclusiveness around access to the things that are important to all of us. I know in the past, one of the programs I managed in an organization here was credit counseling. And one of the things that was always very dismaying when people were over indebted and really struggling as to how they're going to meet their financial obligations, and keeping their job was at the core, a core of those struggles. But 25% of people's net income in the majority of cases was going towards the costs of owning and maintaining a vehicle. I mean, now we're talking often about people that have, they're working, so they're working families, but they're often with lower paid jobs, not always. But 25% of your income, and is just huge. And yet, without that vehicle, people couldn't get to work. So it was one of those like catch-22 sort of situations that I saw over and over. I think that the options that the light rail transit and the whole system will give people now to being able to work and not having to depend on having cars is absolutely huge. For the people that have never had cars and still had the challenges of really limited access to the many of the things that are important in our community, it's huge to have a public transit system that connects us all. That I think that in all of my years, I worked a long time in mental health and in like social services, as I say, and I think at the basis of so many social and emotional issues is isolation. When people are struggling alone with almost anything, all of us can relate to this in our own life, but when you're not connected, when you're isolated, the incidence of all kinds of social problems and health issues just escalates. So I'm really an enthusiastic champion about the importance of how our light rail transit will give far greater access to a range of essential community necessities, both to those without cars, those that are over indebted, but to lots of average citizens that are just isolated. And what we're going to see is far greater equity and inclusivity in being able to connect to work, to school, to shopping, to leisure and recreation, places of worship, parks, sports and playing fields, concerts and galleries, health and social services. All of those components make up really the mental health of both individuals and communities, and that the equitable access is going to be huge. I also liked how Mike, talked about the increased health benefits, and I think that we're all going to be a little bit healthier as we take those few steps to our stations from wherever we live. I noticed on the map downstairs, and I think that maybe the Laurier students are going to be a little healthier than the Waterloo students. You can look at the map and you'll figure out why too, I also think, like the stress of not just driving our cars, but finding parking spaces leads to, huge sort of challenges in the community. And for those of us, I led an organization in downtown Kitchener where parking was a major issue. And, to just get our staff and our clients to make better use of public transport is an ongoing challenge. So everything we can do to give people options that, prevent us from using all the valuable downtown land for parking spaces is pretty important. Most of all, though, I want to say, and kind of wrapping up here, that I think that the light rail transit is going to give our community another chance to grow up. That, like people who have all talked about when they came to this community, I came when it was still Waterloo Lutheran University, actually, in the 60s to Kitchener, Waterloo. And when I think of, and we have all talked about the development we've seen, there is a growing sense of a strong and vibrant community with a great future. And I think that light rail transit has a lot to offer to our shared identity and our community identity and just our civic pride. That, you know, I think, you know, I've focused a lot on the well-being of individuals, but really a community is only as strong and healthy as its individuals. And as our pride grows as a community, as individuals, we benefit as well. So, as in all initiatives that bring about great change, they don't happen overnight, and we won't see the immediate impact. We will see some impact for sure right away, but the full impact of the light rail transit is really the legacy that we're building for the future of our community, and that in decades to come, I think that the social and emotional and environmental well-being of our community is on the right track for lots of growth when we have a sort of visionary plan around public transportation. So, thank you very much for your attention.
So to Kathy, Daisy, and Mike, I can think of no better way of conveying raise your voice, be heard, and thank you all so much for your time and for your comments. The other point I was thinking about, just reflecting on really quickly, was we focused a lot on the three cities, and the question is what's in it for the townships. Not only are the townships areas that have lots of significant environmental features and groundwater recharge, but we are fortunate to have over 225,000 acres of prime industrial land, or prime agricultural land. That's almost Freudian. That's almost Freudian because Councillor Kelterborn often reminds me that agriculture is arguably the largest industry in this region. So another really resonant thing, and I think Councillor Kelterborn, the bumper stickers that we see throughout our community say it all: farmers feed cities. So a good reminder for us. We are going to end at that point. I would say again, thank you so much for your time and for your interest. I hope you all will raise your voices and also join us for the reception. We are so excited and very grateful to you all for your involvement. Thank you very much. For those who aren't aware either, reception is